Hi lovely and darling viewers, it's Jen here at Check Her Joy. This time I'm reviewing No Dream Is Too High, Life Lessons from a Man Who Walked on the Moon by Buzz Aldrin and Ken Abraham. This is a nonfiction book. It's part advice and maybe self-help, but also part memoirs of Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon. So it was entertaining and interesting. Buzz Aldrin definitely has this larger-than-life persona, and he's done a lot of really amazing things that most of us don't get to do. I mean, walking on the moon is one, but also he's been to the North Pole. He's been deep sea diving. He's had all kinds of adventures, trying to get onto Air Force One and everything, meeting with celebrities, being a guest star on sitcoms and The Simpsons, and Dancing with the Stars. Things that most of us wouldn't get to do. So sometimes it's a bit weird having, here's my advice on what you should do with your life, but then he backs it up with these really crazy things that happen to him. I don't not believe that they happen to him, but, they're not things that are going to happen to me. But also the advice he's giving makes sense. Be persistent. Be open to learning new things. Learn how to laugh. Learn how to adapt to things. That kind of advice fits for anybody, but some of the examples he gave were really entertaining, but probably not things that are applicable to my life. So it's got a weird mix to it. Most of the time I just found this entertaining, but sometimes it got to be a bit too much, so it took me a while to get through just because I'd stop for a while. But it was also set up in a way that's pretty easy. There's, I think, 13 chapters maybe. So this entire book has a very conversational tone to it. It sounds like you're sitting down with a grandparent who's just telling you all these stories about their past, but the crazy things that happened in their past was walking on the moon. So that's an interesting take on it, but it also felt very accessible. He's good at explaining things in very simple terms, or at least I guess Ken Abraham was good at adjusting that. But it definitely feels like it's Buzz Aldrin talking to you and having a one-on-one conversation, which was really awesome. So some of these stories were a bit outlandish and things that aren't going to happen to us. We're not going to have stories about going to the Olympics and meeting athletes, and then also going to the North Pole, and watching people skinny dip on the North Pole. I mean, Buzz Aldrin didn't do that, but he thought it was funny that other people were taking the polar plunge there at the pole itself. So some of these stories are really, really genuinely funny. He is the first person to pee on the moon. So when he jumped off the ladder, he just peed. So he's in a spacesuit, and they've got the urine collection stuff all in the suit. So there's no reason not to pee. So he just let it go on the moon. I mean, it's not all over the moon. It's still in his spacesuit. But he was on the moon at the time that he peed. So that was kind of funny. It's a story that he likes to tell children, and I totally believe that they would absolutely find that hysterical. He also talks about, at the Olympics, he was so excited that even though he was having pains in his feet, he didn't want to stop. So he kept brushing it off, because he didn't want to have to go to the doctor or something and leave. And then when he does finally suck it up and take off his shoe and, look at his foot, the problem isn't actually his foot. The problem is that when he was packing, he shoved socks into his shoes to, save space in the suitcase. But he didn't take all the pairs of socks out, so there's still a pair of socks at the very ends, and that was, too much pressure on his foot for, 4 hours, so that's what was causing the pain, which I thought was kind of funny. It's just ridiculous. If he had just stopped 4 hours ago and taken off his shoe and checked it, his assistant manager was trying to get him to do, he wouldn't have been in pain for 4 hours. Like I said, sometimes this feels a bit too much. Sometimes it feels kind of just showboating, look at all this cool stuff I did. So I did kind of have to stop and pause at times. But then when I came back, I was rewarded with more over-the-top stuff that was awesome in a way. My absolute favorite stories, though, were still about the space program, about the Apollo 11 mission, finding out more about Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins and their time together. He talks about Neil Armstrong's funeral, how he was there at the National Cathedral, and there's a moon rock that was put into one of the stained glass windows, so it's part of the cathedral now, and it's one of the rocks that they brought back in Apollo 11. So while they're having the funeral for Neil Armstrong, they have one of the rocks that Neil Armstrong brought back that is part of the cathedral. schedule. So that's like really cool that that's a thing that happened. So it wasn't just that, but he talks about the other astronauts, not just Neil and Michael Collins, but some of the other ones that he worked with and trained with. And then he also talks about all the stuff he had to do to get into the... And then he also talked about some of the stuff he had to do, how he, like, applied to be an astronaut in, like, the second round of astronauts they brought in, but, like, he wasn't actually a fighter pilot, and that was one of the requirements at the time, so they wouldn't let him. So then he goes to MIT and starts getting his degree so that he can work for NASA as, like, an engineer. And then the next time that they are accepting astronauts, they took away the fighter pilot requirement. So then the second time he applies, he ends up getting accepted because now he doesn't need to be a fighter pilot. And now he's got this MIT experience, and he's been working on Rendezvous, which is one of the things that NASA needs to figure out to be able to land on the moon anyway and get people back. So he ends up getting accepted then and getting accepted in the Gemini program and then Apollo. I love space, so those are the parts that I was most interested in. There's also a story about him trying to touch a whale shark, which if anybody else had tried, probably wouldn't have gone down. So they were scuba diving, and whale sharks are huge. They're like the size of whales, but you're told not to touch them. But he's Buzz Aldrin, so he like goes up, like the mouse up here, just eating on fish. He goes up and like swims alongside it and is like touching the whale on its back. And the whale is like so focused on other stuff he doesn't even notice. So it ends up being okay, and his son took some really amazing shots of him touching this animal. There was also a huge focus on here in the going to Mars thing. This is like Buzz's project. This is what he wants to spend his later days doing. He wants to use his celebrity and his like I was on the moon thing to get people to go to Mars now. And so that's pushed throughout this book, but I think it's so fascinating, and it's something that I am also like, I really want to see people on the Mars and go to another planet, that I was totally behind it. So on the whole, I gave this 4 stars. It's fascinating and interesting and really well done. So let me know in the comments below if you've read this, if you've read any other books that Buzz Aldrin's done. I know he's done some about like Mars specifically, and trying to get people interested in that. Anything else about Apollo 11 or the space program, or just like memoirs that you think are really awesome that I should check out. Yeah, I'll post links to other space-related videos, books that I've done. I've also read Shoot for the Moon by James Donovan, which talks about, which is a nonfiction book talking about like the entire space program up to Apollo 11. And I'm also reading Moonbound right now, which is a graphic novel about Apollo 11 in the space program. And I've reviewed Hidden Figures, so all of those will be linked, at least once I've got the other videos up. I will link them. Peace out. I love you guys, and keep reading. Bye.